Thank you. Thank you. I'm an attorney, so I'm probably going to walk, so I'll have to talk a little louder. I feel like it's my wedding day. Every time my wife talks, she knows how to pull on my heartstrings every single time. If you've had the pleasure of ever reading some of her posts on social media, and I'm not talking about my campaign posts, but about her true love, which her true love is helping those in need. And the way she just has the ability to just really talk from the heart. It always touches me, and it's one of the reasons why I fell in love with her, and I thank you. I also want to say I'm just a guy that wears his heart on his sleeve. I'm not a politician, but I'm somebody that wants to make a difference. And I want to say how truly humbled I am just by the number of people that have come out to support me personally and to support what my candidacy represents. I thank you all for being here tonight. I don't know what quite to say. I can tell you that I am excited. I'm excited for Washington County. I'm excited because while I see family and friends and colleagues here tonight, I also see teachers that I've dealt with. I see police officers. I see correctional officers. I see lots of attorneys. You would guess that. I see hairdressers. I see construction workers. I see pizza delivery drivers. I see truck drivers. You know I'm talking about you. I see businessmen. I see homeowners. I see communities. But most importantly, I'm excited by the fact that I see Republicans, and I see Democrats, and I see independents. Why? Because I'm excited because I believe that you realize that your personal safety here in Washington County is nonpartisan. I believe that you realize that the personal safety of your children or your grandparents here in Washington County is nonpartisan. I believe that you realize the security of your home or your personal belongings here in Washington County is nonpartisan. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to our safety in our county, the status quo is no longer safe. And that's a safety issue, not a partisan issue. My name is Bernard Semler, as you probably know, but with your help and with your support, I am going to be your next state's attorney for Washington County, Maryland. And I believe together we're going to make one heck of a difference. Before I tell you a little bit about why I'm running, I'd like to take a moment just to recognize some elected officials and current candidates here tonight. We have Washington County Commissioner candidate Donna Brightman. Donna's here. Thank you. A good friend of mine who I did not see when I was working the room, Washington County Commissioner candidate Harry Jones. Harry, I see you. Register of Wills, who I'm happy to say is unopposed, Jason Malott. Thank you, sir. Democratic Central Committee members, candidates, Mary Ann Kaiser. I think she's over there. Yeah. Jeremy Leisure, I saw you, thank you. Pam Faulkner is also a candidate for there she is, thank you. House of Delegates for District 2B, Peter Perini. There's Peter over here. And another good friend of mine, someone who's fighting the good fight, City Council member Emily Keller is also here tonight. Thank you all for being tonight. Thank you for your service. Thank you for... thank you. You snuck in without me seeing. Thank you so much. Another good friend of mine works on the floor right below me, City Council member Lou Metzner. Thank you, Lou. It's funny that I actually looked up before I started, didn't I? And I saw you. Thank you all for your service. Thank you for your desire to serve. Thank you for being here this evening. I also wanted to mention, because I was not on social media, I'm not really a social media person, that's my wife, but Jeremy did remind us that today is International Women's Day, and I think it's important because it's about, part of that movement is about women getting the right to vote around the world, and certainly let's have a round of applause for the women and the women that can vote. Friends, the simple truth is, at least to me, is that criminals don't choose their victims by political affiliation. They just don't. I mean, that's common sense. And no party has a monopoly on public safety. Therefore, I can tell you right now, up front, that you're not going to like everything that you hear tonight from me just because you're a conservative or a liberal, a Republican or a Democrat, an elected official or a hardworking citizen. Nothing about my campaign is directed to win over a particular party, or for that matter, to make people feel comfortable. That's not my job. That's not why I'm here. My sole reason for running is to make our county safe again. My views and beliefs on the criminal justice system in the current state of Washington County are not confined by political ideology. They are based in the not watered down truth that the status quo just simply cannot continue in Washington County. This that you see, obviously my yard sign throughout the hall and behind me here tonight, the bottom line. I wanted people to know that this is not a fear-mongering tagline with the intent to scare the public. That's not my intention. My intention is that to me it's a statement based in fact whose sole purpose is to galvanize each and every one of us to expect more and to demand more when it comes to our personal safety and the personal safety of each and every one of our loved ones and the personal safety of each and every one of our neighbors, which to me is important because in today's social world, it's so easy just not to talk to that neighbor that lives right next door to you. There are two quotes, and I picked this gentleman only because when I was in high school and college, he was the president, but there are two quotes by former President Ronald Reagan that I think best describe our county's current predicament. Now, while Reagan spoke these words very broadly about our nation, as I stand here tonight, I'm somewhat shaken by the fact that his words some 3 decades later so accurately speak to the problems that we face here today in Washington County, Maryland. The first one, and I apologize in advance, I can't do impressions, so I'm not going to even do a fair impression of the Gipper, but Reagan did say, status quo, is Latin for the mess we're in. Reagan always had a way of putting things. He was very blunt, truthful, and he almost always added a touch of humor in it. But the status quo of public safety in Washington County is a mess, and there's no humor in that. With my wife, as you heard, we've been blessed to raise 5 children here in Washington County. I would not have had it any other way. But the county of today is not the same county of 20 years ago, or more importantly, 13 years ago when my opponent first took office. You see the mess that we're in, and that's part of the reason why we chose this venue. You see the mess that we're in the daily newspaper articles about murders and gun violence and robberies and burglaries and home invasions and drugs. You see the mess that we're in the neighborhood meetings that I've attended and I will continue to attend, where people speak of the days where they could leave their front door unlocked without the fear of being victimized, where they could receive packages on their front porch without the fear of theft, where they could send their kids to school without the fear of bullying or drugs or now rising gang activity. You see the mess that we're in, and I know this is, as I said, close to Emily's heart, and sometimes the paper doesn't even report it to the extent that it's occurring. You see the mess that we're in the number of young people overdosing daily due to the rampant peddling of heroin and fentanyl on our streets, which is taxing our law enforcement, our fire and EMS employees beyond capacity. And finally, you see the mess that we're in the number of task forces that have been established and reestablished by law enforcement to deal with these problems and many others. It's not hard for me to understand. I hear a task force is being put together and it tells me we have a problem that has spiraled out of control or one that is about to. Now here's some statistics, and these are not mine. I think statistics can be easily manipulated, but these are ones that you could have read in the paper because each one of these was a story in our paper. On one single day, On one single day in May of 2017, the Washington County Narcotics Task Force and the Hagerstown Police Department responded to 23 overdoses in one day. That was less than a year ago. The statistics for 2017, for the number of overdoses for 2017, once again exceeded the number of overdoses for the previous year. The number of fatalities from fentanyl skyrocketed in 2017. The number of fatalities from heroin or opioids was within one of 2016, which was within one of 2015. You would think these fatalities would be going down because of the training and the prevalence of Narcan, but they're not. They're not, because the problem is not being addressed appropriately. The problem is not being addressed comprehensively. The problem is not being addressed collaboratively. I'm not saying people aren't trying to fix it. And as I said, I keep pointing to Emily because I know that's close to her heart. But until people get together and understand you can't just meet a couple of times a year and think it's going to solve things. You can't just talk about problems. You actually have to solve them. And none of this is going to change. It's going to be the status quo that continues to remain the status quo unless you vote. On one single month at the end of 2016, law enforcement received 30 separate calls about gunshots fired. 30 separate calls in 1 month. A task force was put together to address this issue and then was shortly disbanded a few months later, only to be followed in 2017 by a record number of murders here in Hagerstown. With that trend seeming to continue into 2018, as we had a murder, I think, within the first 10 days, and we had a double shooting at a 7-Eleven, not but a few blocks from this very venue. These are problems that, as I said, will just continue to grow. And if that wasn't enough, if that wasn't bad enough, at the end of 2017, law enforcement put together a child sex trafficking task force. Why? Because we had the 4th highest number of suspected juvenile sex trafficking victims in the state of Maryland, exceeding both national and state norms, as we were behind only Baltimore City, Prince George's County, and Baltimore County. And with all due respect, that's not the company we want to be in. We are not a big city county. What's most disturbing about those statistics is that 84% of these sex trafficking victims were our own county residents. I love Washington County, but to not recognize these problems, to not have an open and honest conversation about realistic solutions to these issues will leave you condemned to the status quo. It's a status quo that deteriorates what we love about this county, the small town values, the small town social fabric. Whether it be Hagerstown or Funkstown, Smithburg or Boonesboro, Keedysville or Sharpsburg, Hancock, Clear Spring or Williamsport, it is a status quo that can never just become acceptable. Now understand, especially I so appreciate the law enforcement officers that are here today. Nothing I am saying is a referendum of law enforcement's response to the status quo. We're already asking, I've said this repeatedly, we are already asking too much of an overworked and undermanned part of the criminal justice system here in Washington County. That's the way I feel about our law enforcement. And I say that with complete sincerity too, and respect for the efforts of each and every officer of our law enforcement in the respective town police departments. When you go on social media, or you go to a neighborhood meeting, and people make statements that somehow it's law enforcement that's to blame for the status quo, or for the failure to keep us safe, they are missing something. What they are missing was referenced in a report that was given to Governor Hogan by the Maryland Department of State Police, which says that the fact that police deal daily with crime does not mean they have unlimited power to prevent it, to reduce it, or to deter it. Because they are just but a single part of the criminal justice system. And crime prevention is the responsibility of each and every part of society. And therefore, proactive crime prevention should clearly be the responsibility of your elected state's attorney. but yet it isn't, and it has not been. Ladies and gentlemen, the hardworking officers of our law enforcement risk their lives daily to protect us and keep us safe, and yet my opponent finds it difficult, if not impossible, to leave his office to support their proactive initiatives in a collaborative and unified crime prevention effort. This is a status quo that my opponent has allowed to occur and then has failed to address. And the riskiest thing we can do right now, the most dangerous thing we can do right now, is simply maintain that status quo. Frankly, to me, it all boils down to a lack of leadership. When someone can actively participate in the solution and assist in and advocate for proactive crime prevention, and yet they voluntarily choose to be disconnected and unconcerned and not confront the conditions that their constituents are faced with day in and day out, that's a problem. That's a huge problem. And once again, it's a problem that just doesn't fix itself without your vote. And a lack of leadership in that, in my opinion, my opponent has no focus, no direction, no common plan for prosecution. And I say this with all sincerity, and if you have the answer, please give it to me, but I honestly don't know what my opponent is actively trying to draw a line in the sand about. Is it the murders, the rising gang activity, the repeat offenders, the opioid epidemic? I was in court daily, and I don't know the answer. I also challenge anyone to tell me that's here tonight or who's going to watch this on social media later, to tell me what program or policy has my opponent instituted in the last 13 years that has truly benefited our county in any way, that has made our county safer in any way. To be the answer is none. There are none. This is a state's attorney who back in 2006 said, "I have not forgotten the courtroom, unlike my peers in jurisdictions my size." Let me repeat that. He said, "I have not forgotten the courtroom, unlike my peers in jurisdictions my size." Given the current state of Washington County, I did not even understand what that meant. So I had to break it down, so I'm going to do that for you. I'm going to start with the second phrase first. Unlike my peers in jurisdictions my size. A lot of people don't even know what the state's attorney does, but state's attorney prosecutes the cases, but there's two thought processes of how it can work, his and mine. But I guess he's saying that he's doing a better job than these other state's attorneys. But where are these other state's attorneys located? Because to my knowledge, no other state's attorney in a jurisdiction of similar size, no other state's attorney in a county of similar population is having a record number of murders, is being referenced in the same breath, in the same statement repeatedly as Baltimore, has a town on social media, this town, that's being derogatorily labeled as Baltimore the West or Little Baltimore. And that has to change. That has to change. And as for I have not forgotten the courtroom, I imagine he's trying to say he's being tough on crime, and in my opinion, the crime is spiraling out of control. But when I hear that statement, and the attorneys in the room here that practice criminal law know this to be a fact, when I hear that statement that I have not forgotten the courtroom, it regrettably makes me think of the Tom Cruise character in A Few Good Men, who walks into the courthouse and says, "So this is what the inside of a courtroom looks like." Why? Why? Because if you know what goes on in the criminal courthouse, it is more the exception in the norm, that my opponent actually ever even steps foot in a courthouse, let alone a courtroom. This is a state's attorney that doesn't personally try felony cases. Which would be tolerable, if not for the fact that, in my view, his absence in the courtroom and lack of managerial skills leads to a lack of mentoring, training, and supervision for the prosecutors under him. So, obviously you could tell, am I a harsh critic of my opponent? Absolutely. Am I a harsh critic of the status quo? Absolutely. I'm critical of a state's attorney that has done little to curb the violence in our streets, the influx of heroin into our county, the burglaries of our homes, or the rising gang activity in our neighborhoods. I'm critical of non-involvement. I'm critical of apathy. I'm critical of a failure to think outside the box to solve our public safety, crime, and drug problems here in the county. Frankly, my opponent, and this is where I said there's two different mindsets. And my mindset I didn't even invent. I thought I did until I found an article written in Harvard in 2002. There's two different mindsets. The first one is that he represents the past to me. It's a lazy and outdated approach to what a state's attorney's office could be, where he just keeps the prosecutors in the courtroom while allowing law enforcement to take the blame for any increase in crime, or the judiciary or judges, I guess, to be blamed for any leniency in sentencing. It is a reactive approach. It does not prevent crime because it only deals with crime after the crime finally gets to the courthouse. Unless you believe that somehow the harsh sentences that people are saying aren't occurring, that those would somehow keep people from committing crime because they've seen the sentences that are being handled out, which really never happens. It's a hands-off approach. And it's a hands-off approach, in my opinion, has failed Washington County. And you see this hands-off approach in everything that he does. This is a state's attorney that can't be bothered to attend public safety or neighborhood watch meetings to talk to the residents about what can be done about crime prevention or the opioid epidemic. He can't be bothered to attend city or town council meetings to answer questions about what his office is doing about crime prevention, the opioid epidemic. Can't be bothered even to go on TV with law enforcement for a press conference to talk about what's going on about crime prevention, the opioid epidemic. He cannot be bothered to do any of that, but yet he'll still come out and ask for your vote. And to me, that's ridiculous.
Yep, sure.
The future of the state's attorney's office, and this is his mindset versus my mindset. The future of the state's attorney's office now requires, and the public should demand that it require, for state's attorneys not to only efficiently and effectively try cases, which if you talk to law enforcement either here or in the towns that I've visited, is not happening, but not only efficiently and effectively try cases, but also actively be involved in our community, solving public safety issues through tough enforcement measures to combat crime and the implementation of proactive intervention initiatives to prevent crime before it occurs. A lot of words in there, but basically I've just said, hey, elect me as your state's attorney and I'll prevent crime before it occurs. Well, I mean, that's a little crazy. That's a little crazy, but to an extent it can be done. It can totally be done.
Yeah.
It can be done. But to do it, it takes more than just saying the words. I'm going to prevent crime before it occurs. Because if all I do is say the words, a month from now, 9 months from now, if I'm even elected, which I believe I will be, all I do is ever just say those words, eventually it'll just become a soundbite, or in today's words, a meme. What is so much harder is to put the work in and day out, day after day after day, to guarantee that crime reduction becomes a reality in our county. Because how do you prevent crime before it occurs? You can hire more police officers. That's number one. We can't do that, at least not right now, not with our tax base. New York did it. They just hired more officers. There's an officer on every street. Or you can have a state's attorney that understands you prevent crime before it occurs by being tough on the causes of crime. And you can't be tough on the causes of crime if all you do is sit up in a courtroom or in your office. And you have to have somebody that's personally invested in the process and not someone that's just absent and out of touch. And that's where I would say I come in. I was first asked to run for state's attorney about 10 years ago, to be honest. It was by a well-respected attorney here in town. He approached me, and as you heard, I started my career as an attorney later in life, having been a public school teacher for some 8 or 9 years. I'd only been practicing 2 years. I thought I had gained the respect of my colleagues because as a litigator, as a tough litigator, but it had only been 2 years, so my answer was honest. I said, I don't think I'm ready yet. But as the years ticked by and I got older, and as you can tell, my beard a little, I got grayer. I realized that my plan for my life and God's plan for my life weren't matching up. And as often is the case at least in my experience, is that God's plan always weighs out because, as I said, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and God knows if he just wears on my heart or on my mind long enough, there's only one answer. And I realized that for me, I wanted my life to be about more. I wanted my life to be about what I can do for others, what I can do for my community. And this all came to a head about 3 years ago to this date. It was March 1st, 2015. My mom's here tonight. I love you, Mom. This is my mother in the front row. This is Elaine Semler. My dad would be here tonight, but I was just talking to somebody. My dad is the head basketball coach at Hagerstown Community College, and it's March Madness. So they're at a game. They're trying to make it to the national championships for JUCO. So my dad, unfortunately, is playing, but I'm praying that his team does win.
They won.
They won. There you go. My mom devoted her whole life to the public school system. Before the words "no child left behind" became political, I think that was my mom's motto. She cared about kids. She cared about kids from the minute she woke up to the minute she went to bed. She was an amazing teacher. Then she became an amazing principal in this county for so many years, and just retired. What's it been now? Time flies. A couple years now.
2011.
2011. And my dad served in the Air Force. He was a United States Air Force veteran. He served. I called my mom today. I knew my dad served about 20 years. We think it's about 21 or 22. Then was honorably discharged and went to work for Frederick in Frederick County doing their web pages. But as I said, now he gives back. Even though he's retired, he just can't stop coaching those girls, which I'm proud of him. But 3 years ago to this date was not a good day for our family, and I apologize, Mom. 3 years ago to this date was not a good day for our family because my younger brother Jason, he followed in my dad's footsteps. He also went into the Air Force. He served about 9 years before he was honorably discharged. He did a couple tours in Iraq during some of the worst war years, in my opinion. Then once he was discharged, he went to work for Sierra Nevada out at our airport. Great company. They've really my brother worked there when they just had a hangar. Now if you go out there, they got buildings. It's a great company. But it required my brother to go back in the private sector, back to Iraq again, and then back to Afghanistan when the war unfortunately went back to that country again. I think it started there and kept moving back and forth, unfortunately. But 3 years ago to this date, my brother unfortunately became a statistic. He became one of the 22 or 23 service veterans that take their lives each and every day. I think my brother was suffering with PTSD. I think he was suffering with depression. I think he was self-medicating with alcohol. And after my brother passed away, as I said, March 1st, 2015, and in the days and the weeks, the months, and now it's been just 3 years, just this past week, all the unanswered questions, because some people even here tonight that reached out to me who have been through that same thing. It's just lots of unanswered questions. The only thing that I realized, and this is what I talked about at his funeral, is that you cannot wait to reach out to someone. You cannot wait to reach out to someone and say the words they need to hear, to do the acts that they need done for them, because then it could be too late. And I realized at that point that this applies on a broader scale, that you cannot wait in your community for somebody else to fix our problems all the time. You cannot wait. And that really was the impetus of me making the decision to be here tonight before you, for me to run for state's attorney. That was 3 years ago, and let me tell you, it's been a hard wait to be on the stage. I have not been the probably the best spouse to deal with, waiting to be here. But at this point, if you ask me if I'm personally invested in this, my answer to you is absolutely. Absolutely I am. But now comes the time, because I know when I start talking about statistics or I start talking about my opponent, it seems so negative, but these are the facts. These weren't my facts. These are just the facts. But now comes the time where my candidacy, I must say that my candidacy must be more than just about a condemnation of my opponent or the status quo that has occurred under my opponent's watch. My candidacy must also provide realistic solutions that directly result in a safer Washington County. And therefore, some of the first things that I will implement as your elected state's attorney will be school-based intervention initiatives, community-based collaborative crime prevention, new and innovative ways to deal with problem areas and addiction, and 4, zero tolerance for those that would continue to choose to victimize here in Washington County. School-based intervention initiatives is an easy understanding. It's easy to understand. Our next wave of addicts, if left unaddressed, is coming from the schools. I mean, that's obvious, the next generation. A Washington County press release that came out in November of 2017 that the newspaper just reprinted a story about a month ago said 1 in 6 Washington County residents between the ages of 16 and 24 are disconnected from school and work. Once again, we're 4th highest in the state. 1 in 6 between 16 and 24 not working or not in school. When you hear statistics like that, it's not hard to wonder why we have a crime problem, or we have a drug problem, or we have a now rising gang activity problem. If public safety is to be a priority, we must address this issue. That's why, having been a former public educator, former public school teacher, I will have no problems working with Washington County Public Schools to repeatedly give hard-hitting but age-appropriate presentations, not just at the high school level, which is, we don't even have anything at the high school level now. I think Trone just gave some money to do a high school program, but at each and every elementary, middle, and high school in our county, it's not just a photo op. I'm not about photo ops. I'm about getting things done. It needs to be an indispensable step to addressing gang activity and addiction before it even occurs. Something that now we're 4 or 5 years into this opioid epidemic and still is not done. My office will take the lead on that, and it will get done. Community-based collaborative crime prevention is easy to understand as well. Crime is a community problem that will require a community-wide effort to overcome. If we're going to be tough on the causes of crime and be proactive, we must do so collectively. That is why I will be assigning, and I've already talked to different smaller towns throughout our county. We have Boonesboro, we have Hagerstown, we have Smithburg, we have Hancock, Clear Spring, and I will continue to talk to them. But I will be assigning a community prosecutor, a community liaison, who will go to the town council meetings, will go to the neighborhood functions, will go to the neighborhood meetings, to not just sit there, but actively participate and be held accountable for the crimes that occur in those communities. It seems, what I hear, and I continue to hear, is they're not efficiently and effectively being handled. Have a prosecutor there that can show up face to face and say, we're taking your crimes serious, we're making sure the witnesses are in court, we're making sure that we get the job done. Something that these towns are already paying for. That is why this is an easy sell, because I walk in and I say, you're already paying for this. They pay the state's attorney's salary. It's the Washington County state's attorney, but yet they don't get the representation and accountability. And my office will do that. But it requires, as I said, somebody to make sure that they are held accountable and they're there. Third, I've watched the successes of nearby counties, such as Frederick County, Montgomery County, and Carroll County. They have all chosen to be innovative and move forward and be forward thinking, while we have chosen not to be. They have implemented programs such as adult drug court, veterans court, and mental health court. All of these problems are created to deal with lower level crime and addiction. They're easy to implement. They are not about reinventing the wheel. They're not about creating more bureaucracy. My office would be handling it. But they're about providing and focusing our resources and our resolve to give those that need and want help the tools they require so they do not reoffend. But those are the key words. And this is where, as I said, not everybody's going to like everything that I say, but I do speak from my heart. Need and want help. If you need and want help in this county, I will do everything I can to provide quick access and opportunity to treatment, because that needs to happen. As I said, it is not enough for me just to have a meeting every couple months and think things are going to change. It is not enough for me to just talk about things and think things are going to change. You must put the hard work in. However, as I said, if you need and want help, I will provide it to you. However, if you choose to victimize others in this county, you will be held accountable. And that brings me to Reagan's second quote. Reagan also said we must reject the idea that every time a law is broken, society is guilty rather than the lawbreaker. It is time to restore the American precept that each individual is accountable for his or her own actions. And that's where it becomes difficult, because as I said, I've seen addiction in my own extended family. My wife's mother, my mother-in-law, was an addict till the day she died. Good person, but just wouldn't turn away. I have gone to heroin summits and heroin forums, opioid forums with Emily and with many others in this room. Victoria Sterling, I was looking for her. Washington County Health Department. I've gone to those, and I've lived by the thought that, but for the grace of God, there go I. I have compassion and I have sympathy. I do. But you would be electing me to do a difficult job. And there is a balancing act there, and I'm willing to do that balancing act. But in the end, I cannot allow, if you choose to victimize other people, I cannot allow your addiction to outweigh someone else's safety and well-being. I can't do it, and I won't. And finally, I like to talk, I'm finally. I will have a zero tolerance policy with regards to violent crime, and those that would be holding handguns with disqualifying and violent offenses should never be in possession of a gun. You wonder why, and I was asked this, they said, well, we had a record number of murders. What could the state's attorney's office done about that? Get the guns out of their hands when you pull them over before they shoot somebody with the gun. While we had a record number of murders, New York City had a record as well. New York City has 8.5 million people. They had, and the number might seem large to you, but 8.5 million people, they had about 295 murders last year. Now, that is a number that has not been seen since the 1950s. How did New York City do it? Compton, California. Compton, California. Everybody thinks Compton, California. Now, I lived in Arizona when I went to school, and I was on the track team, so we went to UCLA, USC, we were in the Pac-10, now it's the Pac-12. Compton, California was a place you wouldn't walk into in the 80s and 90s. You would not walk into that town. Now, it's a thriving community with rising property values. How did they do it? And I picked Compton, California for a reason. This is a palm card. Now, if you do not know what a palm card is, with 22 people running for county commissioner, you're going to find out real quick. This palm card, usually palm cards talk about the candidate and what they're going to do. This palm card is from our mayor, Mayor Brucey. And I'm not going to give Mayor Brucey a hard time, but this is Mayor Brucey's palm card from 2016 when he was elected. Now, on here he says that he wants to make our streets safe, something I agree with. He also says these past 4 years have seen a 40% increase in drug-related crime. Hagerstown is more unsafe than 87% of American cities, including Compton, California. So, why do I bring that up? I went to that website. Interesting about that website, when Bob used that statistic, the website actually is a year behind. So that statistic is using the 2015 property and violent crime statistics in our community. They're saying we're 87% more unsafe than all the other cities in America. If you go to that website right now, we've actually gotten worse, because now they've gone to 2016 statistics. We're now more unsafe than 88% of American cities, if you believe the website. What do you think that number is going to be when the 2017 statistics show up with the record number of murders? We're probably more unsafe than 95, 96% of the cities in America. Now, I should take these statistics and I should knock on every single door and just say, this is how bad we are. Oh, this is how bad we are. But I don't, because as I said earlier, I believe, honestly, that statistics are easily manipulated. I believe that it comes from underreporting of crime or overreporting of crime, or just the validity of the statistics that are taken, or even smaller things like the amount of overtime that law enforcement gets. What I've always believed, and what is a better indicator of your safety, of your community, is a feeling. Do you feel safer today in Washington County than you did a year ago? Do you feel safer today than 4 years ago? Did you feel safer today than 13 years ago when my opponent took office? If you do, then maybe I'm not your guy. But I would bet that you don't. And why would you ever settle for the status quo if places like New York City and Compton, California can get the answer right? Why would you ever settle for less here in our community where we live? This is our community. It belongs to all of us. That brings me to the end. To simply be impartial at this juncture. To simply vote a party ticket. To simply put your head in the sand like my opponent has done and just hope that the statistics this year are better than the year before or the next year. To simply believe that everything I said tonight is just a perception and not the reality. In my opinion, to simply do any of those things is to have already accepted the status quo. If you love our county, if you care about our county, that is something you cannot do. That's why, come November, I'm going to be asking you to trust me with your vote. And I promise you, I will not let you down. I will not let our county down. God bless you. God bless Washington County. Thank you for being here.